75% of podcasts get taken out by Podfade, which is essentially podcast burnout. So in today's video, we are going to give you the tips that you need to stay in it for the long haul. You know when a show gradually stops putting out new episodes and then ends up falling off altogether? Well, that's because people are losing motivation, and it's the reason that most podcasts don't make it past their 7th episode. So we're gonna give you 5 key strategies to help you avoid podfade or podcast burnout, whether you're new or seasoned podcaster. Tip number 1, set realistic expectations. And there are 2 key ways to do this. You need to have realistic expectations of your podcasting journey. So the reality is you're probably not gonna become the next Joe Rogan or Brene Brown year 1, 2, or 3. Completely fine, completely normal. What is important is that you remember why you're podcasting, and then you set objectives that are measurable to get to your unique podcasting goals. The other place that we wanna be mindful about setting realistic expectations are when it comes to our stats. So sometimes when we start a podcast, we're not quite sure if we're hitting those key milestones. But on the Buzzsprout platform stats page, we offer some really interesting data to help you navigate where exactly your podcast lands in relation to others. So if you are receiving 30 downloads in the first 7 days of publishing a new episode, you are already in the top 50% of all podcasts. Pat yourself on the back. The next thing that we can do to avoid podcast burnout is to plan. So the first way to plan, especially when you're starting out, is picking a topic that you know is sustainable. This means choosing a topic that you could talk about for at least 25 episodes. 50 would be even better. So if you're sitting down and you're considering a topic and you can only come up with 5 different episode titles, that's probably not going to be the best choice for you. You'll probably mop yourself into a corner, and that will definitely lead to a lack of motivation. The next thing to avoid podcast burnout and planning is to start out with a series or season style format. If you start out with a season or series, you've got a limited number of episodes. You're really just dipping your toe in the water. So you're able to put out those 5 to 10 episodes and then pause. And in that pause, you can see what went well, what didn't, and you can see if you want to continue going with podcasting. Sometimes we feel like we've started and we have to continue. What's really great about having a series or a season is that you have a built-in break to evaluate how the season or series is going. Plus, when you come back from your series or your season break, you can decide to do a continuous flow. You don't have to stick with that. You're not chained to doing seasons or series from then going on. You can always change your mind. The other thing that gets podcasters in trouble is their release schedule. You really want to determine a sustainable one. So consider your current lifestyle and its demands. Then add in needing to record a podcast, having to then edit that podcast, and then promote and market that podcast so people even know that you have it. Now, consider with your current life's demands and having to do all that with a podcast, what's a realistic schedule? You may have thought a daily podcast is exactly the thing for you, but is that feasible given your current responsibilities? It may not be, and that's totally okay. Be empowered to choose a sustainable release schedule that works for you. If you're a seasoned podcaster, obviously you said it when you got started, but maybe now things have shifted and changed, and we need to make some adjustments. That's completely fine, totally normal. Just make sure that you give your audience an adequate heads up so that they know that the release schedule will be shifting and changing, and their expectations are set accordingly. The last piece of planning that you're going to want to consider is establishing a solid workflow. If sitting down and doing your recording, editing, and marketing all in one day feels overwhelming, it doesn't have to be. You are totally free to break things up into chunks. You can record for an hour, edit for an hour, and then market for an hour. Or you can just have a recording day, have an editing day, and then on the weekends you talk and work through marketing. The biggest thing is that you think about what works best for you, what's a good rhythm, so that you have a sustainable workflow, and then to adjust accordingly. So the less that you have to think about episode to episode, the more space your brain has to come up with a creative and amazing episode, right? So you can automate as far as the structure of your show. This means that you're not thinking about what's gonna be the intro, what's gonna be the outro, what's the format of the show gonna be. You've already established my intro happens for this amount of time, we're gonna set this interview for this amount of time, and then we're gonna have this bang up outro where we talk about resources and how to connect with us. You have a solid structure that's established to flow through your episode, and you're not coming up with that every episode. The other way that you can sort of save some time with automation would be with your social media marketing. You can use a post scheduler like Hootsuite or Buffer. That way you can batch all your social media posts for your episode, set at the beginning of the week, and they'll release at whatever time you set throughout the week, so you're not thinking about that. You save time, you save brain space, you create an amazing episode that people know about. Tip number 4, delegate. So delegating may apply a little bit more to our seasoned podcasters, But if you're new and you have a co-host, it's really important that you establish who's going to be responsible for what. That way you share responsibilities and one person isn't just carrying the load of the entire podcast. If you have a little bit of a budget, think about those things that are time-consuming and draining, that are not adding to your creative power at all, and consider paying someone to handle that. If you hate editing, like most of us do, you could pay someone for that. If you don't really like getting on social media and doing the self-promotion thing, you could pay someone to do that. Delegating is a really great way to make sure that you're maximizing your efforts and energy, as well as focusing on the things that you do best, while giving those things that are maybe not your favorite, that are draining, to someone who would enjoy them or would be willing to do it. Tip number 5, take breaks. Breaks are totally normal and completely okay. If you are a podcaster whose podcast uses seasons, just make sure that you communicate when the season will end and when your audience can expect you back. If you are a podcaster who does not use seasons, totally fine. You can batch episodes so that you get a little bit of a breather. You're not making episodes constantly when you've batched and have scheduled your episodes to be released. That way you can get creative, you can rest, and rest is important for a podcaster who is avoiding burnout. If you're interested in this whole taking a break, podcast season thing, check out this video that Sarah did about the benefits of podcast seasons. That's it for today. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep podcasting.